everyone. My name is Jessica Cordero, and I am a community organizer for the HeatSmart CNY campaign. And today you will be hearing from Andrew Simkin, a heat pump homeowner, Lindsay Spear, our campaign director, and Matt Dennis of Halco, one of our partner installers. I'm going to be watching the chat for any questions that may come up, but like I said, this is less of a presentation and more of a conversation, so feel free to unmute and ask questions as we move along, and we will get started.
So, Andrew, would you like to start off?
Okay. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I am owner of a actually heat pump system that is half Mitsubishi and half LG. We have an older house in southern Cayuga County that has on one end of the house, it's got a Mitsubishi outside unit and two indoor units, one being a wall unit, the other being a floor console. On the other end of the house, we've got an LG outdoor unit with two wall units that it serves on that end of the house. I also am involved with the Friends Meeting, a church in Poplar Ridge, where we have an LG outdoor unit and two indoor heads installed by Halco just last year. And they're not intended to fully replace our system at the church there, but they heat and cool a portion of the building. So I've had experience when working with those systems, but I'm not don't have a technical expertise background. So Matt does, and so Matt, please chime in as we go along with anything. Just I think everyone on the call is pretty familiar with heat pump operations. Have your outdoor units and your indoor heads or indoor units. And then the only main third element of hardware are the remotes. Matt, you have your remote handy there to show. Everyone's seen those. I think that's an LG. So in terms of operation, what I have found, and I think the standard guidance is that you use them a little differently than you use a fossil fuel HVAC system. And the main difference is that the heat pumps tend to be sized in such a way, and their operation is such that they cruise along comfortably when they are at speed, but they take a little while to get up to speed if you're starting from a standing start. In other words, if you're trying to warm up the house from, if you let it get down to 40 or 50 degrees, it's going to take a while to warm it up. So for that reason, and as well as for efficiency reasons, the standard guidance is that we don't set them back as you might with a fossil fuel furnace, set it back to 55 at night and then have it kick on at 6 in the morning or something like that. You're better off keeping it at a set temperature, adjusting it, as needed for comfort, but not trying to do a setback unless you are going to be away for a significant period of time. The other thing I have found in terms of operation, there's a mental difference in having a heating system that is low cost to operate, but higher cost up front to install. And the difference is that you don't feel bad about using it when you're if you're a little feeling a little cold, a little chilly, go ahead and pop it up a couple of degrees to be comfortable, because you don't feel that you're going to be breaking the bank by the cost of operation. And it also makes me feel better about using them for cooling, because again, the cost is quite reasonable to operate. So I think that's a big thing that I've noticed, and it may be an instance of something I read about called Jevons paradox, that sometimes you can have a higher efficiency technology and you end up using it a little more because it's higher efficiency. It's if you have an LED light bulb, you're less likely to worry about turning it off if you're going to be away for a few minutes from a room, for example. Another aspect of using the heat pumps, fan settings, you can put them on different speeds. You can put them on different angles. You can even have it, you can put it on automatic, and you can have it be chaos, so that it changes all the time to get maximum mixing and distribution of the air. That, I think, is a matter of personal preference. I personally, I like having it a low fan setting so that you can barely hear anything at all. Units are pretty quiet anyway, but it's going to vary depending on how close you're seated or how close you are to the unit, and just personal preference. But I think the easiest thing for the most part is find something you're comfortable with, both in terms of temperature and with the fan setting, and then leave it alone, other than times you need to change the mode to switch from heating to cooling and so forth. One thing that people who have not used heat pumps are not familiar with, because most other heating and cooling technologies don't give you this option, and that is the dehumidification setting, or dry setting, dry mode. And that we're looking forward to using that at our meeting house this summer. This will be the first summer that we've had these in place. And in fact, I just set those remotely with my phone. I set our basement unit to the dry mode. And the idea is we're hoping to not have to use the dehumidifier that we've used in the past, and keep the basement humidity down just with the heat pump. And so it's providing cooling as well as dehumidification, and that condensate water just drips right outside. So that, I think, is a major advantage depending on your setting. It's if you've used a dehumidifier, you potentially can save that energy for an additional savings.
I see a question, or Marie has her hand up. Do you have a question, Marie?
Yes, I wondered if, Andrew, could you say some more about what you called chaos setting, the automatic, because I've never played with that at all.
Yeah, I think I'll defer to Matt. Matt, do you have any comments on that one?
Yes. So the sort of chaos setting, or different manufacturers call it different things, but it's pretty much what it does is it weighs. It's supposed to simulate sort of a natural airflow throughout the house, or like a natural breeze or something. So it's blowing in all different directions randomly, rather than a directed airflow. It's just kind of going all over the place. Not something, if it's depending on where. If you've got a ducted system, you don't have that option. It's really a ductless version, or a ductless feature. And if you've got a larger space, that's when you'll notice it as more of a beneficial thing. If it's a smaller space, you're not really going to notice it anyway. yeah, like I said, different manufacturers call it different things, and depending on the models that you have. Sometimes the older ones don't have the feature, so it can vary a little bit, but it's really just you know, kind of air all over the place.
Thank you.
Great. So one other thing with the operation of the unit is that any one condenser or outdoor unit can only be either heating or cooling / drying at any given time. So you want to not try to have one indoor unit on heat while the other's on cool from the same outdoor unit. But Matt has reassured me that if I have a guest that hits the remote and
You shut that fan off.
tries to get heating from one while the other's cooling, it's not going to blow up the unit. It's just going to it's going to refuse the command and not operate. Right, Matt?
Yeah, you'll get an error code. And actually, I'll see if I can't simulate it now, because my system's on cooling. That's one of 4 units connected to one outdoor unit. I'm gonna switch over to my phone. I don't know if you guys can see this. I don't know if you can read the where it says 72. I'm gonna switch it to heating, and that should, if it doesn't make me look a fool. Still getting. Well, eventually that's going to read an error code.
Okay. And then after the error code, Matt, is that going to reset itself after a period of time, or do you have to change the setting on your remote?
So it will. What I'd have to do is it'll basically refuse, because it's prioritizing cooling, because that's what got there first. So now that I've got it switched to heat, it'll. The temperature's not low enough, but the what it's going to do is it'll just throw an error. It won't do anything. Oh, started blinking. There we go. Can you see it blinking?
Yeah.
So it's in standby mode right now. It's shut off entirely. It's closed. The vane is closed, and it's just blinking an error code. So this particular error code is the system telling me that, hey, you're trying to run the feature that it doesn't like, because the other units have prioritized. And the same thing happens if it's in heating and switches to cooling. But all I have to do is turn it off and then turn it back on. And it says 68 again. It's going to try to heat again, but it's going to realize it's same thing's going to happen. It's going to not like it. So I'm going to switch it back to cooling so it stays on. But yeah, you're not going to break anything. The machine knows that you can't do that. Some equipment doesn't have the digital display, so it might blink at you, or it just might not do anything, and you just have to know. Look at the remote and see what setting you put it in, or look at your app if you've got it. But yeah, you're definitely not going to break anything. It's not going to hurt anything. It just won't work.
Great, thanks, Matt.
Yep.
Just show us with the remote, which is the heat and cool, just for the people who might be watching this video later and may not have their own remotes to look at.
I should unmute myself. There we go. So I actually, just like Andy, I have both LG and Mitsubishi in my house. Got an older Mitsubishi unit that was kind of left over in the shop, so I adopted it. So on the LG system, on the very top, you can see what looks like a snowflake. And the first thing you're going to think is, oh, it's a snowflake. It's winter. It's not. A snowflake is cooling. And then when you hit mode again, it switches it to the auto feature, which we'll talk about in a second. So I know that's on the list. The raindrop or the teardrop, that's drying, which is drying, dehumidification and drying are both cooling. So you can run it dry mode and cooling mode at the same time. That's the sun, which is heat. You think sun, shiny day, you need air conditioning? No, it's heat. And then, that's just the fan. So you just have it in fan setting or fan mode, and you can run fan mode in any combination of different modes. And then for the Mitsubishi one, it's pretty much the same thing. It's right on this side, and it's going down instead of across. So that I think is just fan. Let's see what that is. Oh, that's a sun. Not a very good one. That's dry. That's I'm sorry, that's the sun. It's the same order of events, if you will. And then that should be back to fan. So
Yeah, that's I actually had that experience with my sister-in-law visiting, and it was winter, and she was cold, and so she started fiddling with the remote, and she said, "Oh, I need to warm up, so I'm going to keep it in the snowflake mode because that indicates it's winter and it's going to heat the place." And I think, unfortunately, I was not around and never did get resolved, and they had a cold night. So that's a thing to bear in mind in orienting people to the use of the remotes.
Yeah, and the reason they use pictographs is because these remote controls and this equipment is sold worldwide. It's not just the United States. So instead of manufacturing 1,000 different remotes in 1,000 different languages, they use pictures. It's easy to put different languages on the buttons, but the internal programming, it's Celsius and Fahrenheit built in and pictures. So that's why I encourage folks to use the app, because the app is a little easier, a little less cumbersome than some of the features on the remotes.
Mm-hmm. So let's see. One of the basics, of course, that you'll learn on installation is that you need to clean the filters. And there's a filter in each indoor unit that the air blows over, and over time it'll get dust and lint and so forth on it. What I have found, I think you may hear that vacuum cleaner is good, which I think is true. What I like to do with mine is to run them in the bathtub under the faucet. That clears off all the debris, and it doesn't run the risk of getting the stuff floating in the air again. But either of those, I think, will work. And the frequency of cleaning the filters is really dependent on your environment, how much dust there is in your environment, and how heavily the units are used. So that's something to kind of check periodically. And you may want to figure out a reminder system, like every time the season changes from spring to summer might be your reminder, or you could put it on the calendar. But yeah, anything to add on that, Matt?
No, like I said, it's how often you clean it's really just dependent on the air quality in your home. Once a month is a good sort of practice to check it until you figure out how often you really need to clean it. Obviously, if you've got multiple, a bunch of people in the house, or you live on a dirt road, or you got animals and you're in and out all the time, you're kicking up dust, okay, you're probably going to need to clean it more often. But if you're the little old lady that only leaves the house for Sunday church, then you probably don't need to clean it every single month. Lindsay asked me if I had a filter. I can pull the filter out of this. Just bear with me a second. Yeah, one second. You see me? Okay.
Yeah, yeah, it's a good angle.
Two. So the nuclear system, the filter's on the top, and we got it loose, so I should be able to grab it.
Okay.
So they're all pretty similar. Let's sit back down. Yeah, it's like. Okay, so like I said, they're all pretty similar. You can see it's a full mat. Like I said, this particular model LG, the newer LG ones are all on the top, so you can just pop them out. There are other ones where the front of it will lift up. Mitsubishis are like that, and some of the older LG ones are like that, where you lift it up almost the hood on a car, and you slide it. It's the same mesh type filter. You slide it out, wash it, pop it back in.
All right.
Do you need to let it dry?
Yeah,
before you
it's
put it
just
on?
mesh. I wouldn't really worry about it. It's just water. That thing takes out water. Not gonna hurt anything. I wouldn't put it up there like soaking wet, but you just shake it out.
Okay, great. And the other thing that to bear in mind in terms of the flow of air is your outdoor condenser is also blowing air over itself to extract heat or add heat, depending on the season. And I was surprised to notice how fast the vines started growing up one of ours, at our house in Sherwood. You do want to take a look periodically and make sure there aren't drifted leaves blown up against it, or growth of plants or anything else interfering with the flow of air. They do get installed on a stand that's a good 18 inches, maybe 2 feet off the ground, so that most snows will not affect it. But that's also something to bear in mind if there's a big snowstorm, to clear the snow away so that air can flow around that condenser outside. And now let's get into the service aspects, professional service. One of the things that's harder for a homeowner to do is to clear dust out of those. There's no removable filter on that outdoor condenser that you can take out and vacuum off. So that's one of the things that will be done with a maintenance visit, is to clear off those coils outside. And that's something that would typically you would want to have done annually, along with checking other aspects of the operation to make sure everything's working. One thing, we had a service visit, and I noticed that what they did is take a thermometer and just read the temperature of the air coming into the indoor unit and the air coming out, see how much of a difference it was achieving. And that would, if it were having trouble with that, that would be an indicator that there might be a reason to do some further exploration.
See, Marie has another question.
Since we're talking about the outdoor condenser, this was our first winter living with the heat pumps. And I noticed a lot of ice buildup under the condenser. I assume that's normal, but should I think about doing anything about that?
Go ahead, Matt.
Basically, I should half a second to unmute myself from my phone. There's a couple reasons that might have happened. You might have runoff coming from somewhere. I don't know where your outdoor unit is, but if you've got water or anything onto the unit, say for the deck or something, it's going to refreeze when it hits the heat pump, because that heat pump is blowing cold air out because it's taking the heat out of the air. So anything is going to freeze fairly quickly. Depending on the type of heat pump you have, and it sounded like you said you had the Mitsubishi Hyperheat, so that can be an issue, but sometimes there are some heat pumps that don't have called a base pan heater built in. The usually have, and the other ones don't.
Hey Matt, your audio is cutting out quite
Tiny
a bit.
little heat to prevent ice from building up. Okay, hang on 1 second.
Is that better?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Okay. So I don't know how much you heard, but the outdoor unit, again, if you've got stuff melting on it and runoff water melting on it, it's going to refreeze when it's working, because it's blowing the cold air out of that off of the heat pump. And then if it doesn't have a base pan heater, which is just a little heater to keep the ice from building up, that could happen. I can tell you one of my units is underneath the back deck. So when there is, when the snow melts from the back deck and it just drips off onto the unit, it freezes the patio in front of it, because it's blowing cold air. So it'll melt and freeze. As long as the ice isn't growing onto the heat pump itself, I wouldn't worry too much about it. And as long as, obviously, if it's a safety concern, of course, we try not to put these things near walkways, because you'll freeze a walkway and get, ice and slippery and somebody could fall. But as long as it's not getting onto the unit itself and it's just kind of on the ground, it's not really a big deal, just because, it's all based on placement. And then there's also, it could also be an issue of the weather too, melt freeze.
Yeah, I actually built a shelter roof over the unit outside, and it sits on a cement pad that I put in before they put in the unit.
Okay.
So this just seemed to be dripping off of the condenser. And I just made a note of it, and have been wondering whether every unit does that or not.
Yeah,
it's not a safety issue.
Yeah, I don't know for sure, because again, it could simply be it could be the base pan heater is just melting the ice build up on the compressor, and it's just dripping, and then it freezes by the time it hits the ground. But again, if the ice isn't coming up onto the heat pump itself, I wouldn't worry too much about it. But you should keep an eye on it and make sure that's not happening, because if the compressor freezes, it will get damaged.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
So, one of the important topics, that I think people considering an installation may not think of right away, and that is the what kind of after installation service there's going to be. And it is, other types of furnaces you can usually get a service contract for. I found, for my own thinking, I wanted to get the service contract for the heat pump. It was a pretty big upfront investment, and I wanted the peace of mind to know that it was covered if anything went wrong. So there is, even without any additional purchase, there's a pretty much automatic 1-year warranty that the installers have to offer. And then the manufacturers will provide a warranty as to their product itself, not necessarily the labor involved, but the product itself will have a warranty that's going to depend on the manufacturer. And then you can also discuss with your installer what kind of service contracts are offered. And that can even, maybe something you want to find out about before signing the installation contract to know what's going to be the length and cost of a regular service contract. What I have with mine is a 10-year contract that covers everything, labor, parts. So I know that it's going to be a fixed cost during that 10 years to keep those things running. The ones we got at the Friends Church, we just installed in September. So typically, you won't sign for a contract until the end of the first year. So they'll come back for a 1-year checkup, which is not something that costs you anything extra. And at that time, you have the opportunity to consider, do I want to get a service contract? And if so, you sign and you start paying a flat rate for that service contract. And I think these things will differ from from installer to installer and from manufacturer to manufacturer. But it's, to my mind, it's a very important thing to consider as a homeowner, and factor that into your planning. Matt, any additional words on that topic?
Well, one of the things I was looking for is I wanted to show some pictures. So from a care and maintenance standpoint, we talked about the indoor unit. The outdoor unit, as Andy had said, is pretty that's the heart of the system. That's where all the work is happening, is that unit outside. So it's really important to make sure that is kept up as well. And it's not really something a homeowner can really get in and clean properly. You could get a garden hose and kind of hose it out, but you're not going to really, you have to open the thing up and take it apart to clean it properly. The reason for that is, inside that outdoor unit is basically a giant radiator. It's this coil, this aluminum thin coil that's, is the heat exchange mechanism. And it's constantly pulling air in very high rates, both heating and cooling. So year round, you've got a lot of air coming through this thing, and it's picking up dirt, dust, pollen, debris, those little floaty things that we get when the dandelions die. All that stuff gets sucked in, and it builds up over time, and it can build up very quickly, which is why an annual maintenance is really important. Because if you let it go too long, what happens is that all gets gummed up and clogged up, and the heat exchange doesn't work, or it works less efficiently. And then you've given up the whole reason you have a heat pump is you've given up on the efficiency of the system and the operation. So when you turn it on, it doesn't work, or it doesn't work nearly as well. And then, if you Google, I just Googled dirty heat pumps, you'll find just look at the pictures. You'll see these pieces of equipment. A lot of them look like traditional air conditioners, but it's the same rules apply. And those are the, you see how caked up those things can get, and it doesn't take much to shut the system down or to freeze it out. And if you don't have adequate air exchange, the refrigerant can actually start freezing the compressor and freezing the components and damaging the system to the point where you've got to spend a bunch of money to fix it because it wasn't taken care of properly. You wouldn't not change the oil in your car. You wouldn't not check the fluids and the brakes and all the other moving parts on your car. Same thing happens with a heat pump. The only difference is you got to call somebody to come to your house to do it. But yeah, it's really important, if you make this investment to maintain it.
How would you know if the efficiency quotient has gone down?
you'll see a spike in your electric bill. Because at a certain point, like air source heat pumps, the lower temperatures they become less efficient. That's just how it works.
Right.
When it gets super cold, it almost gets to a point where they're no more efficient than an electric heater. But those are the extremes. If you find that all of a sudden your electric bill has gone way up, there's a good chance that there's a problem somewhere.
Okay.
But you would know if you've had the thing serviced or not, I would think. So if you've gone a couple of years, that could be part of the problem.
Okay. Thank you.
Mhm. So these are, all the topics that I had in my outline, and so I would welcome any other topics, questions, discussion.
So I have a question. My question is, I don't know if within this session you're allowed to make recommendations on who to call to have your unit. We have the iHeat Mitsubishi heat pump units outside. And the people who installed it is TAG, and TAG no longer exists. So who would you recommend to service those units? Yes, I'm listening.
Call Halco.
Halco?
Halco. I'll do a cheap plug. Halco Energy. We're one of the partner installers with HeatSmart, and we have a dedicated service department specifically to keep all this equipment that we install running. So even if somebody didn't install, or we didn't install it, we can maintain it for you.
All right, thank you.
And we're very familiar with a lot of these contractors that no longer exist because we get those calls all the time.
Yeah, and we also have a high efficiency boiler.
We can maintain that too.
Okay, good. 2 for 1. I like it. We'll give you a call.
Okay.
Yeah, I had the experience. I bought a bicycle, kind of a high-end bicycle for my wife, and I splurged on the lifetime service contract. It was a one-time fee, and bicycle was covered. And then the bike shop owner died, and it turned out that was the end of the service contract.
Whose lifetime was it?
It was his lifetime. So yeah, I think that's an important factor to look at is, what has been the trajectory of this company, and how well established are they in terms of likelihood that they're going to be around to continue servicing. But I think all is not lost if you have a heat pump whose installer goes out of business, because there are companies such as Halco that will come in and install or service one that was installed by others.
Unless it was installed really badly, in which case we don't want to touch it. But we'll let you know if it was a problem. Because unfortunately, there are contractors out there that aren't as reputable, and there's also situations where somebody tries to install it themselves and just doesn't really know or understand what they're doing. They look up a YouTube video and think that they're an HVAC installer. Those rules that doesn't usually work.
Matt, I was wondering if you could talk about, signs and symptoms to look for with your heat pump that, it might be time to call the installer because something might actually be wrong with it.
Well, obviously, if it's not performing the way it's supposed to, that's sort of the easy one. If it starts making weird noises that it's not supposed to, that'll be another one. Because there is a possibility that if there is an issue with the compressor outside, or the evaporators inside, what'll happen is if the refrigerant cycle can't complete properly, it will actually make noise. You might hear a popping or gurgling or cracking sound because the refrigerant is trying to cycle through and it's not finishing its cycle. So when it's supposed to come back as a liquid, it's actually a vapor, which means you're pushing it through a smaller tube. Yeah, or that really actually that's kind of the, if it's just not doing what it's supposed to be doing. Most of these systems are fairly sophisticated, as we saw when I just pushed a button to make it do wrong, it started blinking at me. So a lot of times if there is a problem, the more sophisticated systems will alert you or just not work. They'll just shut down. I had one a while ago. I had a little pinhole leak in the refrigerant line, and the system that unit just wouldn't work. It was flashing an error code at me, saying that there was an error. It didn't tell me what the problem was. It was just saying, hey, we can't do what we're supposed to do. Something needs to be fixed.
I know one thing that I ran into with someone's winter called me and they said, my unit outside, there's ice on the actual heat exchanger itself. And what that ended up being diagnosed as, I believe, was that the refrigerant was low. Can you talk about that as a little bit?
Yeah, so if the refrigerant charge is wrong, that can absolutely happen. The same thing can happen as if there's not adequate airflow. So as I was saying, it's if you took one of these units and built a shroud around it or a covering. I see it all the time with air conditioners. People don't want to look at them, so they think that they can just throw something over it and then you won't see it, and then they wonder why it turned into a block of ice. Same thing happens with the heat pump. These things need airflow. You need to let them breathe. But yeah, if the refrigerant level is wrong, whether it's overcharged or undercharged, you can have pretty much the same problem. Again, it can't give off the the discharge. You can't discharge the heat the way it's supposed to, or it's drawing in too much and the refrigerant is getting too cold, in which case it will freeze the ambient moisture in the air, which makes the compressor look like the inside of an old freezer. You get that big chunk of ice built up on the sides of the freezer. That's just the moisture in the air getting frozen to the unit itself. There's not like a leak or something. It's just it's sucking in more heat than it should be, thus causing it to freeze. If that ever happens, shut the thing off before you damage it further and call somebody to come and fix it.
Is there any, we're in the era now when there's telemedicine. Is there any such thing as pointing your phone at the unit and asking somebody remotely to give you some advice?
Sure. Yeah, we can do that. Usually if we typically have techs, we've got techs on call 24 hours a day, but we do have at least one senior service tech who just kind of sits in front of the computer all day. So a lot of the times, if he can diagnose it from a distance. I actually just did that yesterday with somebody. Their air conditioner wasn't working. And I said, check the breaker. The breaker tripped.
Mm-hmm.
It was easy. I said, put me, we did a little Zoom thing and she put the phone next to the breaker and I saw it was tripped. I said, throw it off, turn it back on, boom, done. She's got cooling. But yeah, absolutely. That's totally fine. If we can do that, that's great. Some folks aren't comfortable to do that and they don't want to touch anything because they either don't understand it or they don't, afraid they might screw something up. But if you've got somebody that's, has a little bit of chops and can understand and at least follow direction and it's not a dangerous situation, because obviously we don't want you opening up this equipment and putting your fingers in something you're not supposed to, but you can flip a breaker, flip a switch, go outside and be like, hey, this is frozen. And then pan around and it might find that, okay, yeah, it's frozen because your gutter fell off or you don't have a gutter or, everything's dumping on it and it's, you got this giant block of ice. Well, that you got to fix that problem because that's causing this problem. So yeah, we can absolutely do that.
Any further questions?
I don't have another question, but I do have a commendation. Thank you so much for putting this together. Lindsay, is the recording of this going to be available?
Yes.
I would love to have this available so I could say to people, as I talk to them, you know, here's this wonderful presentation. I'm sorry you didn't get more of an audience today. Sometimes that happens, but I'm really trying to push this through our community in Dryden and get a lot of people connected.
Thanks so much, Marie. And yes, we will have this available on YouTube. I have to talk to Jeff about when we're going to get that up due to vacation schedules, but yes, it will be on YouTube.
Yeah, that'll be great. I have to cut out now. I am so thankful for everybody for being here today. So thanks a lot. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
You too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for the inspiration to get our unit serviced.
Very welcome. And I guess I should probably just do a plug for HeatSmart CNY. So we, again, cover the 5 counties of Central New York, Central Cayuga, Cortland, Madison, Oswego, and Onondaga counties. And we're here doing education and outreach around heat pumps for energy efficient heating and cooling. And we have worked with a number of installers that we can recommend. And for more information, go to our website, heatsmartcny.org. Thanks, everyone.